Story 1. It is complacency from taking democracy and other concepts like rule of law, critical thinking, education, history, and governance for granted. Restore all of them, and you will have the scaffolding to preserve it again. Story 2. There is democratic backsliding because people feel they cannot rely on their votes to change things, that political parties and candidates do not listen to them and do not act in their interests. Story 3. Reddit did not like the answer, but it involved imposing serious consequences on the aspiring oligarchs who set this in motion. Story 4. Yes, the Western world is in the middle of a democratic backslide. Liberal and democratic governments need to adequately start addressing the concerns of the populace or face losing to far-right, fascist parties. People have legitimate concerns about increasing levels of immigration and the degradation of social cohesion alongside the unaffordability of goods and services, especially homes. The left in most Western countries has become the party of the status quo, clinging to the old neoliberal playbook and not improving anything for anyone. The conservative wing of the neoliberal and democratic spectrum has been absorbed by far-right, authoritarian populists. It is on the left-leaning governments to rise to the occasion and truly listen to and provide for the people, but they just are not. All of this also does not touch on the role that social media and artificial intelligence play in our fractured information landscape. Story 5. It is going to be extremely hard to do. There is a multifaceted attack coming from foreign nations as well as populist minority groups that have nearly aligned with one another. To save it would mean to strip freedoms. But here goes. 1. Ethics. Establish strong, transparent ethical controls for politicians. They need to report every gift and every bit of financing and from whom it came. Follow the money. It will give an idea of what the donors want them to do. There need to be automatic controls that remove political eligibility when they vote or act contrary to the nation's constitution and laws. It must be a completely independent function free from political party meddling. Severe penalties and eventual removal of eligibility should be applied to liars and spreaders of false information. 2. False news and lies need to have free speech protections removed. Everyone has a right to an opinion, and free speech should be protected as a human right. However, social media, artificial intelligence, and bot farms are swaying the perceptions of the populace through fabrication of facts, misrepresentation of events, and the ability to anonymously spread hate. 3. Censorship of hostile nations. They are already doing it on their side. Russia and China, to name a few, are actively sowing discontent in the Western internet sphere. Those same states have already blocked most outside influence themselves. 4. Expose every person who spreads hate. Make them out as the pariahs they are and give them no quarter. Make it personal and make it loud. Story 6. I'm 40 and I've never felt such a divide in society and politics. The internet does not help, as it creates echo chambers where people don't discuss issues. They shout each other down. A prime example is a post I saw earlier asking why people will vote for the Reform Party, and the whole thread was just people calling Reform voters racist, unintelligent, and so on. You cannot ignore large sectors of society and not expect a backlash. I don't think we will ever have honest politicians, especially when they are allowed private business interests outside of their day jobs. To a certain degree, I'd rather have artificial intelligence making decisions than half of these clowns. Story 7. Remove lobbyists and corporate influence from our government. Story 8. Legitimately, I think the only way we can reasonably change is if the whole world has a ground-up rework of government systems with real, honest people in charge, not millionaires and career politicians. Aside from a mass global revolution, I do not think that will happen. Story 9. A major issue is the problem of mass immigration and illegal immigration. Although some on the political left may downplay it, 90% of the population, including moderates, consider it a problem. Story 10. Billionaires have grown tired of being constrained by the rule of law and are supporting fascist movements across democracies to destabilize and destroy them. Out of the ashes, they wish to build their own corporate feudal states where they believe they can rule like pharaohs and exploit all the people they want. The only way to preserve democracy is to tax billionaires out of existence. Story 11. The way things are going, I do not think we can trust the people to preserve democracy. We need someone to take over and dictate that democracy be saved. Story 12. Those elected to office have been ignoring the masses' concerns over mass immigration, so they are being voted out. Story 13. I would not say we are in the middle. It has been happening bit by bit for over 2 decades. It started around the time of the Patriot Act, maybe even before that, at least for us in the United States. The United Kingdom has been interesting to watch as well, and obviously Australia. Story 14. It's a pendulum. The over-politicizing of global events and changing times has worsened the rift between progressives and conservatives. Progressives are losing momentum on global and national issues that need attention. Think back to 2016 when debates about bathrooms and similar topics distracted from larger concerns. It's not that these issues are unimportant, but there are bigger challenges that require work on a much larger scale. Progressivism ended slavery and racial segregation. It established 40-hour work weeks, paid time off, vacations, benefits, unions, and similar advancements. Today, progressivism mainly focuses on issues that most people do not usually consider daily: LGBTQ rights, genders, pronouns, and identity politics that mainly affect the groups they represent. This is not to say these issues are bad, but a significant portion of the developed world is not necessarily suffering because someone was misgendered. In the 1900s, people did suffer from working 70 or more hours a week, lack of accessible healthcare, and discrimination in employment due to skin color. Conservatism has also evolved and changes every generation. Some say today's liberals become tomorrow's conservatives. The lack of foundation on improvement or evolving with the world causes society to swing between conservative and progressive favoritism. When one side aggressively forces everyone to adapt to new ways, people often revert to conservatism to feel safe again. The more society swings back and forth, the less stable social interactions and political systems become. The implementation of round-the-clock social media coverage has greatly accelerated the destabilization of any societal balance between the left and right. With this growing societal rift, it was only a matter of time before elites and the ultra-wealthy, seeking more power, exploit this insecurity to manipulate enough people to support fascism. History shows this has happened hundreds of times worldwide, always in a similar way. In conclusion, democratic backsliding is occurring, as it always does eventually, and it is harmful to everyone in the long run. The best way to preserve democracy is to hold people accountable for their actions and improve education. Story 15. We can build time capsules, put some books and pictures inside, and bury them deep. Story 16. Well, the same thing one can always do is protest, go on strikes, and if you are in the European Union, make petitions and get signatures. A lot of this comes from people growing complacent or being a bit too trusting of those in power. But hey, we can still stop it, and if they do not want to listen, violence may be a last resort. Story 17. I love how I just proposed an interesting, serious debate over democratic backsliding in the Western world, and I am getting heavily downvoted, as most of the comments, presumably to prevent the post from reaching the best ranking on the homepage and let it sink. Bots and users doing the fascist job the Reddit way. Thank you, everyone, for your thoughtful and honest replies. Story 18. The response is to become more politically engaged. That means getting involved in real life, not just online. It means spending time and money on activism. Things will only change with real engagement and activism. In terms of problems that need to be solved, we have a major disinformation crisis right now that was kickstarted with the rise of social media and is about to be amplified with the rise of artificial intelligence. Much of the crisis is due to the influence money has on social media platforms, allowing both domestic and foreign enemies of Western society great influence over what people view and think about. This is partially enabled by the ability of people to pose as whoever they want and possibly even multiple people, which allows shills to flood our social media. It is also enabled by the insufficient capacity, either due to lack of funding or skills, for reliable sources to counteract the flood of disinformation. Another major problem that needs to be solved in addition to disinformation is a crisis of connection within communities and society. Capitalism and technology have enabled and driven this. The consequence is a drop in trust between people, making it harder for them to work together at the societal level, that is, the political and government level. This forms a feedback loop where diminished engagement on projects of shared well-being leads to less connection and trust, which further leads to less teamwork at the societal level. Story 19. In America specifically, the way to preserve democracy is to elect progressives who will enact a New Deal level of legislation that will change people's lives for the better. Democratic backsliding is happening because people know that their lives are getting worse, that they are working harder and making less money while everything is becoming more expensive. The only way to change this is to regulate capitalism significantly. It is uncertain if that will actually happen, but as long as authoritarian individuals are the only ones making bold promises, uninformed people will continue voting for them even though none of the problems are being solved and everything continues to get worse. Story 20. We are at the end of it, not the middle. The middle was decades ago. We no longer have representative elected politicians. We have not had them in a long time. Once the people no longer have elected officials who represent them, but instead use their positions to enrich themselves, there are very few options left to the populace. You are deluding yourself if you think the current decline will self-correct. Story 21. America, yes. Roughly 1,000 people, mostly students, have been detained or deported from the United States for expressing pro-Palestine views. Immigration and customs enforcement continues to enter workplaces and even churches. Troops are being sent to major cities. Story 22. Honestly, I don't know. The two-party system has been corrupted beyond repair. Donald Trump is like the canary in the coal mine, the last breath of democracy. Perhaps Gavin Newsom can save us, but I wouldn't bet on it. Historically, when countries are divided into two different ideologies, a two-state solution is proposed or genocide. Story 23. Oh man, democracy has been backsliding for almost 10 years now if you include Hungary. Read Twilight of Democracy by Anne Applebaum. That should clarify the backstory. The short answer to your first question is an unqualified yes. For the second question, it would be a mistake not to point out that no one has ever voted themselves out of fascism or authoritarianism. Just saying. Story 24. Yes, and we can help by making certain groups ashamed to show their faces in public. Scorn and public shaming work, and these individuals have earned it. Story 25. Democracy is not perfect. Any system where two unqualified individuals can outvote an expert is fundamentally flawed. Story 26. Studies show that voting does not impact policy. The illusion of Western democracy is slipping and losing legitimacy as it becomes harder to explain the widening gap between the people and the state. Story 27. Not really, if anything, it is becoming more democratic. For decades, the globalist elites have been engaging in democracy theater in most Western countries, cheerfully ignoring the actual political will of their constituents. The election of genuinely populist leaders for the first time in decades is actually a good thing for these countries because it means voters have actual power. Moreover, the speed at which such politicians like Donald Trump are pushing through the reforms they campaigned on clearly shows that it was never about not being able to, but almost exclusively about not wanting to when it came to career politicians who promised big but delivered little. Future leaders will not be able to coast on making empty promises they have no intention of implementing. Story 28. Yes, it is. Pessimistically, I think it is too late to do anything about it. The United States already gave too much power to an irrational leader, and he is going to drive the world's most powerful military and economic power into the ground, taking a few countries with him. The fact that many other countries are shifting to ultra-right nationalist leaders will accelerate this decline elsewhere. We are witnessing the fall of an empire like the Egyptian, Greek, and Spanish before. China will be next, but it will not be smooth. There is a chance we may not make it at all. Story 29. Is the Western world in the middle of democratic backsliding? Yes. What do you think about it? It is the predictable consequence of the radical expansion and hyperspecialization of the modern economy, paired with changes in communications technology, the mass deindustrialization and subsequent financialization of Western economies, collapsing fertility rates and rising dependency ratios, and citizen backlash to immigration policies being openly and quietly advanced to resolve the issues stemming from financialization and demographic changes. What can we do to preserve democracy? 1. Restrict voting to citizens capable of passing a literacy and civic knowledge test. Citizens passing a minimum intelligence threshold, net taxpayers, or citizens deemed ideologically or culturally compatible with the majority population. 2. Allow qualified citizens to submit binding referenda for consideration on the national level. 3. Slow down or reverse mass immigration from parts of the world deemed controversial within one's nation. Emphasize skilled over unskilled labor. 4. Resuburbanize large parts of the population where possible and revive heavy and primary industries where resource exploration and manufacturing are feasible. 5. Align institutions with the principle of subsidiarity. Ensure that local people have as much control over their own affairs as possible. Story 30. We don't actively do anything. We wait for others to act for us and call ourselves a democracy. That's what history has taught us. We have the capacity to do differently, but we don't. Our democracy only works when all three branches are functioning. Take Franklin D. Roosevelt, for instance. Congress went inactive. He replaced the Supreme Court of the United States and was elected for 16 years. That's a dictator. Just because it worked out positively doesn't change the structure. And Franklin D. Roosevelt was a heroic president. Now there are whispers of soft secession, legal ways for states to keep federal tax payments. This is the wrong direction but the easiest course. What this country really needs are 1. Work visas for unskilled labor. 2. Treating drugs as a health issue, not a criminal issue. 3. Unions. We need at least 45% of non-public labor organized. But a Reddit thread isn't the best place to articulate public policy. I can try to expound on my 3 points. Story 31. Yes, that is absolutely occurring around the world. Unfortunately, history has shown us that once fascists are voted into power, it is impossible to vote them out of power again. The only way that any fascist regime in history has ever lost power after winning the vote was through armed resistance. Most fascist regimes remain in power for 30 to 50 years. Story 32. No, democracy has already been lost and has been so for several years. Story 33. Deport all Republican Party members back to Europe. If all white people vanished today, how many wars would be going on? I guess 0. I could be wrong, though. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.